in this episode, I am speaking with Nancy Rabinowitz, and Nancy is sharing her menopause story and how menopause impacted her life. I'm Tawfiq Akir, and welcome to the Mr. Menopause Show. Hello, Nancy. Thank you so much for coming on the show. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you. Thanks.
You know, I've spoken with a few different ladies about their journey, and it's just been so great to see that we're able to get these various stories out to people so that people can, or women in general, can really understand that they're not alone. Being a man who is, an ally and someone who also knows how important it is actually for even men to be more part of the conversation. I'm glad that you were coming on to share your journey and your menopause story, because I know it also involves your family and your work and everything. So I'm really looking forward to having the audience hear your story as well today. So thank you for coming on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. So if you could just start out, just how did your menopause journey start?
Okay, so my journey started, I feel like at an earlier age than a lot of people. I had my last child when I was 41. I had twins. And then it was not too long after that I started having kind of sporadic periods that would be extremely heavy. And I could go for like 3 months without having a period. And I would get to the point where my body actually felt like it was going to explode if something didn't happen. I mean, it was just this strange feeling. And then once I would start the period, number one, it was usually a very, very heavy flow. But also at the same time, there was such relief. Like I just felt like, oh, wow, I'm so glad this happened. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it would be a very, very heavy flow. And just for a short period of time, like say 2 days or so, but it was almost at the point where I couldn't even leave the house. And then of course, with that, I started having some other symptoms that most people have, whether it's perimenopause, menopause, such as the night sweats. And that's kind of one of the main ones. And so, sometimes some brain fog going along with that. But my biggest issue was that I felt so sleepy all the time. I mean, I would be driving in my car and I actually felt like I had to pull over on the side of the road to go to sleep. Oh. And, at first I'm like, well, this is strange. I've never really heard anybody complain about this so much. It's more of the other things, the night sweats and this and that. But that was one of my biggest issues. But also I found that I became very, very, very irritable before I would start a period. And because I didn't know when it was going to happen, it wasn't like once a month and you kind of know when it might happen. It was like, you just never know. It would just, come out of the blue. But it affected my family life because I could see that I was just very irritable and short with everybody around me. And there was one night when I remember it specifically, I kind of really lost control. And I think it scared not only myself, but it scared my family. And I tried some over-the-counter things at the time, didn't really seem to do much of anything. And then finally, I read a book that was written by a doctor in LA, and it wasn't really just about menopause. It was just basically getting healthy, the right things to eat, this and that. But it was written in such a nice way, kind of a layman's terms. And I actually reached out to her, and she put me on some supplements, but also on a bioidentical hormone cream. And I have to say, very soon after that, I really, really started feeling much, much better.
Now, can I just stop you for 1 second? Just a quick question. So now, prior to this, when you were going through all the symptoms, did you know at that time it was menopause?
Not specifically. No, not at the very beginning, because I thought, gosh, I'm a little bit young for this, maybe, because I think my symptoms started, maybe I was 43. So everything I had read, it usually starts in your 50s. I mean, that's what I typically, that's what I was hearing. And so I really wasn't sure. Like I said, it just, I think I quickly, I guess I caught on, and I just kind of, well, I should say, went with the flow for a while, not really reaching out for help necessarily, because I also had young children I was dealing with, and I just became really frustrated.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to think back on that time, if my primary physician or my primary GYN was helpful at all. I honestly don't remember, but I do know a lot of doctors are kind of against any kind of medication or this and that for menopause. Okay, medication for many other things.
Mhm.
And so like I said, it just, I would say after 2 or 3 years of this. I mean, this went on for actually, I would say, quite a while. I would say these are regular, very, very, very heavy periods. Went on, I'd say 5, 6 years.
Okay.
At least, maybe even a little bit longer, before I finally totally went into menopause. I think it was probably more, I would say, like 7 years. So that's a long time to deal with all of those types of symptoms.
Yeah, and you know, so they say that the longest they've seen, and that's actually been noted, I'm sure it's probably even longer, has been 12 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then and another thing a lot of people don't realize is that stage is actually the perimenopause stage, is not even menopause yet. And most people hadn't even heard of perimenopause, right?
That's right. Yes, that is correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, when you said there was an episode where things happen in front of your family, so besides that, you know, that incident, which I'm sure was, you know, a big deal anyways, just because you said it scared everyone. Were there any other things that happened that were like that directly affected your family or your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, I just remember, I remember at the time I had an old dog, and that had a hard time walking. And, you know, I'm usually patient with all of my animals.
Mhm.
And I remember with him, I would get frustrated with him and sort of lose my temper. I mean, I wouldn't do anything terrible to him, but, you know, I could see that, oh my gosh, I'm not as patient as I normally am with him.
Mhm.
And with my children as well. So yeah, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of things I would just kind of blow up
I
at
got you.
the smallest little things sometimes. Yeah.
And so you did the cream and just do you recall what the supplements were?
Yes. So initially, I believe I got some type of cream like at the drugstore,
Okay.
like at I want to say it was called Rainbow Acres. You know, it's like a,
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
you know, and I tried that. You know, I didn't really see it making any difference. And I had already had friends who had been through menopause.
Okay.
They didn't seem to have the same issues that I had. But, you know, honestly, when I look back, and even when I was having periods when I was younger, I was that person who had terrible cramping. And I don't know, you know, that's one thing. I don't know if there's any correlation to what your early menstrual cycle is like,
Yeah.
and then your menopausal symptoms are like. That's one thing I've never really looked into, I guess, or
Yeah.
seen that written anywhere. But yeah, so I tried some different creams at the drugstore or whatever, and didn't really make a difference at all. And like I
Mhm.
said, finally, when this physician gave me so it was a combination of estrogen and progesterone.
Mhm.
And I think at one time later on, it was one of those compounded formulas. At
Mhm.
one time, I believe there may have been a little bit of testosterone in there.
Mhm.
And I used that for, oh my gosh, I would say at least 15 years.
Okay.
I have been off of it now, not by my choice, really. Been off of it I'd say the last 4 years.
Okay.
4 years. And I've had my hormones checked, the levels, and they all seemed normal. So my new doctor didn't want to prescribe anything for me, but I know that, there's a lot of advantages to, there's pros and cons to all of this, but there's a lot of advantages. I know it's supposed to like keep your skin younger and this and that. But yeah, so I have not been on that for I'd say 4 years.
Gotcha. And so when you say it wasn't by your choice, so you're saying that the doctor did not want you to do it any longer?
No, unfortunately, the doctor that I had been seeing all these years, she was unable to prescribe that treatment anymore for her patients.
Okay.
And I think she's not practicing anymore. So the last person that I saw to talk about this situation, somebody that's in gynecologist, basically, like I said, they checked my hormone levels and they all seemed normal. So they did not feel that I should be on any kind of hormones at the time, right now.
Now, was it did they think it was a safety risk, or what was the reason for it?
I think a safety risk, probably. I think that's what a lot of people think.
But they didn't explain that?
No, not really.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I know that one of the things, the higher estrogen levels, I believe it can, if you're prone to any kind, especially like breast cancer, I don't have any of that in my family, none of that history in my family. So that's why I felt safe doing this, all these years. And let me tell you, it really did turn my life around. I have to say, that's the only thing that I can think helped me.
Yeah. Now, do you know what was the HRT that you taking, was it bioidentical or was it synthetic?
Bioidentical.
Yeah, so it's because all the research says that when it's bioidentical, you can use it longer term. It's the synthetic that they mostly worry about, and if you don't have a precursor, or any type of a history in your family, so it's interesting, and that they wouldn't even give you an explanation. It was just. Because my whole thought, because I am on HRT testosterone for men, and one of the things was very similar to you. I changed doctors, and the doctor, when I changed doctors, it was actually the insurance that said, because they check the numbers, I guess, too, to see if I'm taking it or whatever. And they're like, his numbers are normal, do we really need to refill this? And I'm like, well, my numbers are normal because I'm taking it. So, it's like, so to me, I would think it wouldn't make sense to take me off of it, but they actually did. And luckily, well, not so luckily, but my numbers dropped. So they saw that, I had to be on it. But I'm like, I would think that to only make sense that you're taking it, your numbers are normal. So of course they're going to be normal because you're taking it. Now, have you taken tests since then, and have the numbers remained normal?
I have not. And that's something that I've been thinking about. I would actually like to do that, because I know initially the doctor that I was seeing, she basically feels like this is something that women should do really the rest of their lives. Yes, so that is something that I need to reach out to someone and see if I should get that. I should definitely get that checked again.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, if you came into my practice, that would have been the first thing I told you to do, was get those numbers, because that's the whole thing. Like, you were on the HRT to make your numbers normal.
Right.
So, if they take you off of it, and again, number one, the fact that they did not give you a reason why they were taking you off, and then they should have made a follow-up appointment to test your numbers again to make sure. And it's been 4 years. Yeah, I would be making that appointment tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yes.
I'll get on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you say you don't feel horrible, but you don't, feel as well, and that it's beneficial for your body. I would definitely. This is one of those moments where I would say be proactive, because, again, this is your health, your longevity, your, well-being. And most of these doctors aren't even educated in what they're telling you. So it's just something, a journal they read or something they heard, or, and if the person does not specialize in menopause, I would definitely be like, let's do another test. So yes.
Right, right. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I would love a follow up on this afterwards to find out if you actually if the numbers did change or anything.
Uh,
That then I think that would be beneficial to share with the audience as well, if possible.
oh,
Um,
yes. Yeah, yeah,
there you
definitely.
go.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Hmm.
And what about work? Did your symptoms have any impact on your work or anything like that?
Not really. And at the time, I wasn't working that much. I was busy raising my kids. I had my
Gotcha.
kids at an older age.
That's
Yeah,
work.
I know. Yeah, it was a lot of work. But like I said, I just remember I would be short with them sometimes. And I think I mentioned a funny story when we were traveling and I was I was sweating. And I mean, that is really, it didn't bother me as much as I think a lot of women, that's what you really hear about. But but it is true. All of a sudden, you'll just feel it coming on. It just happens out of no place. And and there's nothing you can do about it. And you're just like soaking wet.
Mhm.
And that is pretty awful when you're
Yeah.
out in public.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The last lady I spoke to, she shared, even like, things like burning sensation in your mouth, or she said she had this thing right before her hot flashes. She said it felt like something was crawling under her skin, and like
Mm.
I can't even really explain it, but that's the closest thing it felt like. And she said, and immediately after that, she'd go into a hot flash, and then it would just be burning. And then she said at night she'd be sweating. She said there was body odor, like just all. And I think people don't realize that there's more than 45 symptoms of menopause. They're thinking up to upwards of 60. So it could be any variation of things, because everybody's different. Everybody's
Yeah.
metabolism is different. Your hormone levels are different, and if something else is out of balance in your body and then estrogen leaves you, something else is going to be out of balance that could be causing a symptom that's similar to menopause, and that's not really menopause.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's also
absolutely.
important, I think, especially for women, because I'm thinking more about you and going back to get these numbers checked. So yes, now I'm
Oh,
really now you got me in coach mode. So so
yeah, that's going to be top of my list now. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, is yeah, that these symptoms just they vary so drastically for everyone. And um there's this the people get caught up in this whole hot flashes, belly
Mhm.
fat, mood swings. Yeah, they can be, but some women never have a hot flash, so she doesn't even think it's menopause, and then a doctor
Right.
may tell her it's something else, and then she gets diagnosed with something else. And because again, all these things are so similar sometimes.
Mhm.
Thyroid can cause hot flashes, adrenal distress can cause hot flashes. And if you just go to your doctor and say, I'm 50, I'm having hot flashes, oh, you're in menopause. And you may be, but there's so much more that they could be looking into, because sometimes it could be, certain other changes, lifestyle changes that can actually help. I would say sometimes it's the smallest thing that makes the biggest, change, and we just don't know what that small thing is until we try it.
Right, right, right. Yeah. And it's kind of like that whole thing about, um, I think unless you have actually experienced something, and not that I'm definitely not against having like a male gynecologist. I've had many, and my favorite one,
Mhm.
I adore him. He saved my children. But sometimes I feel like unless you've had an experience, you kind of don't. It's hard to
You haven't had what type of
fathom.
experience?
Right. But I mean, like you're going through menopause, like breaking out in a sweat, and
But
oh,
here's one of the things why I think it's so important for men to be more part of this conversation, because men go through something called andropause, which is very much like menopause. We do get
mhm,
hot flashes. We do
right.
get the mood swings. We do get the belly fat. But I always say this, just like women don't talk to each other about menopause, do you think men are talking to each other about andropause? Really,
definitely.
and so we're definitely not. So we can relate more than you think we can, and you can relate more than we think you can because we're
Right,
not talking about it,
right,
And being
right.
someone that has gone through it, well, that is still in andropause, I know how that, that leading up to, this feeling of you have no control over your body. Like you've lost, I know how that feels. I've also had a stroke. So I know that how that feeling feels of like, something is happening to my body I have no control over, and you just have to deal with it. You know what
Right,
I mean? And so
right,
because it's not so, I don't think it's so much about the experience that is the commonality. I think it's the feeling from the
right,
experience that
right.
makes that commonality, because that at the end, that's what we want to know. We want to know that you understand what we're feeling. You know what I mean? Not what we're going through, but what you're feeling as a result of that. And that's the part that I think that people miss, because we can understand that feeling. We can understand what the actual thing is, but that fear feeling, that alone feeling, that I'm getting old feeling, all of those things. But again, we just don't talk about it.
Mhm.
And there's actually a study that says one of the things that I do is I work with menopause in the workplace and putting in policies for them. And there's been a recent study that came out that said just by allowing people to have the conversation at work, that women's symptoms decrease. You know what I
Ah,
mean? So, because it alleviated anxiety, that fear, because those things can cause your body to tense up and your hormones to be in flux as well, right? But just having that open conversation, another study found that women who hid, like if they were having a hot flash at work and, someone said something to them and they're like, nothing, 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 that people looked at them in a more timid, standoffish.
right,
When
right,
women said, "Oh, I'm having a hot flash, I'm okay," they looked at them as leaders and people to follow. You know what I mean? So just
right.
opening up the dialogue, which is why I think it's so important to include it in the workplace. But yeah, and I just say that to say we understand more than we
Right, right,
either one of us know, the men or the women, because
right,
again, we're not talking about it. And I think that having that's another reason, as Mr. Menopause, I'm coming out saying, we have more in common, and there's things that we can actually help get through this faster, because I think one of the main reasons it's been so slow is because unfortunately we live in a patriarchal world, and men aren't doing anything because they don't think it affects them. But when
right,
they find out that 60% of women who get divorced during menopausal years, hey, it affects you, dude. You know what I mean? It does affect you. Or that they're leaving your workforce and you're losing valued female talent. It's all connected. And we just need to have those conversations, because we need you, right?
right.
And
No,
vice
no.
versa.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, some of the jobs that I've had in the past, I didn't have them while I was going through menopause. And luckily, because I can imagine how hard that is, because I remember just sitting, talking to somebody, and all of a sudden, I break out in sweat. And you're right. You don't want to tell them. I mean, you start banning yourself. So
Mhm.
most of the time, they pick up on what's going on. But it's like, and then you're like, oh my gosh, can they smell? Am I smelling now? And
Yeah.
yeah, so I can imagine that,
Mhm.
having that happen in the workplace can
Yeah.
be very difficult. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but then also imagine, on the other hand, if that did happen at your workplace, but you knew that everyone at work had gone through a training and they understand, wouldn't
right,
that, lessen that, that kind of fear
right.
of that happening, And
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
these are the things I think that can be, and it's also, a DEI issue as well, for employers at this point. So
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So are you, now that you've gone through the process and gone through the HRT, and now are you on any type of a cream or anything now, or you're just completely off of the HRT?
Completely off, completely off.
And any symptoms?
Not terrible symptoms, but I do once in a while, I do have a bit of a hot flash every now and
Okay.
then. It's not often enough to disturb me, totally.
Mhm.
But yes, yes, definitely.
Okay.
And I have recently, I've been feeling um sleepy, sometimes a little brain fog. So that's why I was wondering, gosh, maybe you're right. I
Yeah.
probably do need to go and have my levels done again just to see what's happening,
Yeah.
because that
And
could be
it,
part of it.
yeah, and also again, like I said earlier, it may not, you may not even need all of what you needed before. It could just be
Mhm.
something small that may be beneficial for you,
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so before we take off, is there any last words you'd like to leave with the our viewers regarding your journey and encouraging words for women going through their journey?
Well, it's like I always tell my young daughters. No, well, not young, they're in their 20s, but first of all, it will end. I mean, you're not going to go through these terrible symptoms forever. And and like I said, what I tell my young daughters is there are a couple of good things about getting older. And one of them is not to have a period anymore. That is so great. That's probably one. I think I know two good things about getting older, but that is one of them. So yeah, but yeah, and I think because there's every day there's more and more research, I'm sure, done it, that's taking place, and there are maybe more treatments. And also, if they currently have a physician like a gynecologist who is adamant about not helping them through this and not providing what they need, then they can look elsewhere. They can ask their friends so that they can find somebody that can really help them go through this period in their life, because it can be difficult, but it does end. It does end
Yeah,
at some point.
yeah,
So
yeah. And I'm glad you shared that last part, because everyone that I have spoken with, that's part of their last words, is that if the person you're working with is not helping you, find someone that will. And again, that just goes back to being proactive, because this is about your health and longevity. So yes, I totally agree with that. So thank you for sharing. And again, thank you for coming on the show and for being so open and candid about your experience. Because just like everyone I keep telling, this is going to benefit someone, even if it's just one person. Just hearing your story is going to help someone. So thank you for coming on and sharing.
oh well, thank you. Thanks for doing what you do.
Well, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Take
thank
care.
you. Bye-bye.